Hi, Kim. Can you further explain your economic views? Do you support capitalism, socialism, or are you a third positionist? I like the Scandinavian model. So that is a capitalist system with heavy social protection. So that's what I think works the best. I think that a society that takes care of its people, that ensures the middle class stays robust and healthy, that ensures that the poor are cared for at least with the basics, and that allows for people to get rich, is a good system. Capitalism is not that system. Straight up capitalism is not that system. But straight up socialism is not that system either. And of course, communism isn't. So I would, it shouldn't be one or the other, one choice when it comes to economics. It's really a blending of different scenarios. So definitely a capitalist society with heavy social structure, heavy social protection, just like in the Scandinavian nations. What's interesting about the Scandinavian nations, and I don't just say that because I'm an Iverson. I'm a Dane. I'm a Great Dane. And I was just in Denmark recently. I spent a couple of weeks there. I spent a few months in Italy, but I went and visited Denmark a little bit. And what was interesting about Denmark was, what's interesting about the Scandinavian nations is during the collapse in 2008, when everybody else was drowning, they didn't collapse. And the reason why they didn't collapse is because when people lost their jobs, the social structure of their countries, they gave people the money. So they were like, oh, you're out of a job. Okay, well, we have robust programs to keep you afloat while you're jobless. And because they did that, so people say, oh, you're going to give money away. But think about it. When you give these people money, what happens to that money? Do they just squirrel it away? No, they have to spend money. They're trying to survive. So these people then pay their rent. That means the landlord doesn't default on their loan. They then pay their car loan payment. That means that the car doesn't get repossessed. And that also means the car dealership or whoever, the bank, doesn't lose money. They go and they continue putting their kids in childcare because that's paid for by the government. They also continue to go and buy groceries. They continue to maybe even go out to eat. They're supporting the local businesses that are nearby. They don't have to alter their life too much when things go awry. And because of it, there's actually a huge safety structure in the economy there. And that's what people don't think about here. What they think is that if you give money away, that it's like that's where it stops. Like it vanishes into thin air, like these people are eating the money or something. I mean, no, they're spending it. They're putting it back into the economy. That's what you want. What you don't want is people to not have a job and then they're not able to go and spend the money because then everything collapses like dominoes. So what was interesting in the 2008 crisis was that the Scandinavian nations were pretty well protected because they have these robust social structures, these robust social programs, these protections for people. Nobody lost their home in Scandinavian nations. They didn't lose their homes. Their cars weren't repossessed. The small businesses didn't go out of business. Yes, the government had to pick up the load at that point, and there was a lot of money going back towards the people than what normally was coming in, and the ratio was off for a while, but it paid off. They save as Scandinavian nations. They don't spend as much money on their defense. They don't go and march around the world picking fights with all kinds of nations to get into big wars. They don't have a military-industrial complex. They're not out there manufacturing weapons and needing people to buy them, so picking fights in order to get people to buy them. They don't do that. Because they don't do that, they're able to save their money as a government and put their money in other places. So they stockpile it away for it's the rainy day. I mean, the government does the rainy day fund and the government says, okay, we've got to squirrel money away because if there's a big crash, something happens and somebody in some faraway land does something stupid and our economy begins to collapse, then we can at least keep ourselves afloat as a government. So that's what they do. And then everybody's like, okay, good. And then the country picks back up. The world economy picks back up. It takes 10 years. And the government says, okay, we definitely depleted our resources, but that's okay. Now we're in a good spot. Now we can start squirreling away again. So that's the best economic situation. They still allow for people to get wealthy. Plenty of companies, major companies come from Scandinavia. You've got IKEA, just to rattle one off the top of my head. IKEA, the people that are the founders of IKEA are extremely wealthy. So you can still become very, very wealthy in Scandinavia. One of the biggest clothing designers, ASOS, is from Denmark, and plenty of brands are. You can become insanely rich in these nations. But nobody really becomes insanely rich to the same levels that we have here, like one person eating up $6 billion. Like how many billions do you need? And also nobody's insanely poor. So yes, you can't have the super high level, but it's high enough. And you also don't get the low levels. Same thing like in Germany and Japan, by the way. What they do is they put a cap on what like my ex-boyfriend was a high-level executive at BMW, and he lived in Germany. And so I knew all the kind of inner workings of BMW because I was with him long enough. So, what he found insane when talking about the U.S. was he was like, I don't understand, like, why you let your CEOs make so much money. To them, it's just absurd to allow a CEO to make hundreds of millions of dollars, or, for them, like the cap is like 10 or 15 million annually, and that's it. And then the rest needs to go back to the people, the company. Everybody knows, like at BMW, they all know how much each other makes. It's totally transparent. You know what the janitor makes, all the way up to the CEO. They don't hide it. So it keeps the work environment, the morale high, because everybody knows what it takes to make more money, like what it takes to get promoted, and when that would happen. They know the schedule of when that would happen. They know what their colleagues are making and why they're making what they're making. And they know what the CEO is making. And, all of this is to it lends itself to an environment that is very healthy. And, the Japanese and the Germans don't understand why we let our CEOs run away with gobs and gobs of money. For them, it's not morally or socially acceptable. It's like you'd be shunned if you made that much money. They would look at you like it's just totally unacceptable to them. So we also have a societal issue here, which I noticed when I was living in Italy for those few months. The Italians don't have the same mentality we have of we need to upgrade our homes. We need to make a gob of money so we can get bigger homes. And the Italians like their fast cars. There's no doubt about it. But they live in the same home that they grew up in, and they don't have a problem with it. They're like, yeah, this is my childhood home. And this was my father's childhood home, and my grandfather's childhood home. And I still live here. Like, it's great. They don't have this desire to keep up with the Joneses in the same way we do here in America. And that mentality has created one where people feel like they need to go out there and make a gobs and gobs of money at the expense of everybody else around them. It's like, I don't care what you're getting. I don't care if you're living on the street and you can't feed your children. Like, that's your problem. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to soak up as many of the resources as I possibly can. That mentality doesn't exist in Scandinavia or in Germany or in Italy or in much of the world. It's a very American way of thinking. And it's absolutely been detrimental to our society. Some ways it's been great, because you do end up with a competitive society. And I do believe that competition breeds excellence. I do think that when you are put in a pool with other people, and if they're stellar, you're going to have to rise to that occasion. I do believe that. So it's a matter, but I also believe that we're not the only nation that's innovative. So, and it would be totally false to think that we are. So here you've got other nations who do not have this hyper-capitalistic mentality, and yet they come out with, the Germans, they're coming out with all kinds of innovation all the time. They have the best cars, and so do the Japanese. And you've got two societies that just don't believe that it's okay for CEOs to walk away with gobs and gobs of money, and yet they're still extremely innovative, more so than American companies, car companies. So how well is it working for us, really, to be this way? When you've got and maybe one of the reasons why they're so innovative and competitive and able to be so great is because the people that are not CEOs, the people that are at the lower levels of the company, love their jobs. So they try hard. They're like, yeah, I love my job. I'm cared for. I everything's great. My work-life balance, ratio is fantastic. So when I come to work, I want to give it my all. I want to give the best I've got. Because why wouldn't I? I love it here. Versus like some grumbling employee that's treated like shit and watches their CEO run off buying yachts left and right, and they can't even feed their families. I mean, that's, There, I explained my economic views.